It's with great pleasure that I introduce my colleague and friend, the Chair of Gerontology, Habib Chaudhry.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Andrew. Great to see you all. Thank you so much for making time for us. This exciting Friesen Conference, 40th anniversary. So wonderful to see you here for the two-day packed sessions. So I hope you had a chance to grab some tea or coffee or water. So, yeah. And what a great talk by Dr. Judith Phillips. So wonderful. Thank you. We can come back to that and talk about it more. So we're going to get on to our next session, which is, as the title says here, developing and supporting supportive neighborhood environments for people living with dementia. So we are very excited to share with you a project that we have been working on for the last 2 years. And we are analyzing the data at this point, but also have come up with some knowledge mobilization outputs. So this is fresh off the press, fresh off the factory. So we're really excited to share that with you in the public setting for the first time. So there are 5 presentations here, as you can see, just to give you a broad idea of what's happening here. I'm going to run through the 5 sessions very quickly, who's doing what, and I'm not going to introduce the speakers as we go along. Once we get started, we're going to go very quickly. So the first part is where I introduce the topic itself and also give an overview of the Demscape project. And then Kishore Sitharaman, who's a PhD candidate with the department, he's going to share some of the preliminary findings, what matters in the neighborhood environment. And then we are pleased to have with us Emma. Emma Avery is the urban well-being storyteller and designer with Happy Cities. Happy Cities is a group, international consulting group that has been working with us with our project on a particular knowledge mobilization tool. And then very pleased to also have Rebecca Maffei. Rebecca is a social policy planner, City of Burnaby, and executive director of Civic Innovation Lab. Civic Innovation Lab is a really innovative project, partnership project between SFU and City of Burnaby. And finally, our project manager, Carrie Randa, she is going to talk about our second, one of the important knowledge mobilization tools, resources, a video that we have developed. So that's the lineup. All right, let's move forward. So our project is titled Demscape, which stands for, it's a mouthful, Dementia Inclusive Streets, Community Access, Participation, and Engagement. It's trying to capture not only the built environmental aspects of which is covered by inclusive streets, but it's also referring to the importance of community access to destinations, amenities, and so on in the community, which would lead to participation, engagement, and supporting that on an ongoing basis for people living with dementia. So that's our project team. It's a large, rich team, and many of the individuals are also in this room. I'll mention the co-researchers that have been with us, Lillian Hung and Alison Feeney from UBC, and Shannon Freeman, Mark Grew, and Dawn Hemingway from UNBC, and the whole host of characters that you can see. So 2 things to note is that this project is very interdisciplinary with people from gerontology, nursing, planning, geography, and a few other professions. And also 3 institutions are involved, as you can see, beyond SFU as the lead organization. We have UBC and UNBC working with us. So we gratefully acknowledge the funders. The main funding has come from Public Health Agency of Canada as part of the Dementia Community Investment Program. And then additional funding has been provided by the Alzheimer's Society of Canada and also Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia. We are very pleased and grateful to our municipal partners who are City of Burnaby. Rebecca is representing the city here, and also City of Richmond. So just to put things in context, many of you are aware of the issue of dementia. And this is basically pointing out that globally around 50 million people are living with dementia. In Canada, roughly around 600,000 people living with dementia. This is basically an underestimated number because many people have not been diagnosed with dementia at this point. Many people living with mild cognitive impairment. So the actual numbers are higher than what you can see here. And the projected number for 2030 is nearly 1 million for Canada. So again, another context is the issue of dementia-friendly and inclusive communities. Our project fits in nicely with dementia-friendly inclusive communities. This is the definition from Alzheimer's Disease International. A dementia-friendly and inclusive community can be defined as a place in which people with dementia and their carers are empowered, supported, included in society, understand their rights, and recognize their full potential. We can talk for an hour about unpacking what this definition is referring to, but fundamentally, one fundamental critical piece is dementia education. And then we talk about care, support services, not only for people living with dementia, but the care partners, and the social and built environmental context. So there's a lot that's packed in that definition. So for the context of our project, we are focusing on the neighborhood context. So as we know, the neighborhood environment is important for anybody, especially older people, and especially for people with dementia. So it's a setting for out-of-home activity and social participation of people living with dementia. It supports the neighborhood as a place, supports mobility, physical activity, and access to services and social networks. So, I mean, as you can imagine, going out and carrying out your daily activities, going to the grocery, going to the bank, going to the doctor's office, all of that are happening in the neighborhood context. And that's where the neighborhood built environment comes in. So the built environment is particularly important in enabling or disabling mobility orientation and wayfinding. So just to extend that point again, is unsupportive neighborhood built environment can contribute to reduction of out-of-home activity as dementia progresses. When we talk about cognitive decline that comes with different types of dementia, these are some of the challenges that we anecdotally know, that people have challenges finding their way around in the neighborhood, feeling anxious, overwhelmed in complex or busy or loud environments. And then that impacts accessing local destinations and amenities. So overall, there's anxiety, there's a loss of confidence that lead to some of these impacts. Gradual abandonment in visiting community places and staying at home. We have done a previous study before the Demscape study where we have collected data in Metro Vancouver that actually we have evidence about how people gradually abandon some of the places over time. High levels of dependence on care partners, either formal or informal, and potential social isolation, and potentially decline, the effect of this shrinking of geographical distribution of where they're going can affect in decline in their cognitive and physical health. So ultimately the point here is that the neighborhood built environment is a critically important part of dementia-friendly or inclusive communities approach for research policy and practice. So when we talk about neighborhood-built environment, there is a body of literature that is mostly anecdotal / design guidelines, planning guidelines oriented. So these are the three conceptual bubbles that we can use, drawing from Burton and Mitchell's work. I'm not going to go through all of these, obviously, but just to give you a quick idea of what are we talking about here when we talk about neighborhood-built environment. So we're talking about broadly these three constructs, starting with walkability and land use strategies that include mixed use instead of single use, how we design our streets. We talk about at the very bottom, urban design for comfort and safety that can include accessible public toilets, a big issue, big challenge in many cities. The pathways, sidewalks, frequent and safe road crossings. And then in the middle, especially important for people with cognitive decline, which is the wayfinding. And the wayfinding aspect obviously overlaps with walkability, land use, and urban design. Within wayfinding, we have landmarks, varied urban forms, distinctive features, and so on. So this gives you a framework of what we have been focusing on. So empirical evidence in this area is scarce, mostly anecdotal evidence. And we are excited because our project is the first study focusing on this area in Canada. There have been some studies in the UK and Australia in terms of collecting empirical evidence on the impact of built environment on people's mobility and participation in the community. So the Demscape project's objectives are, as you can see here, number one is to identify neighborhood destinations that people living with dementia visit and changes in the patterns of those visits over time. This was addressed by some of the quantitative aspects of our study, where we collected data in terms of people's different places they have gone over time or since diagnosis, how they may have changed, their patterns of visitations, and how they project things might change over time as the dementia condition journey progresses in the future. And then the second question is the bigger question, which is collected in the different qualitative methods to identify neighborhood built environmental features that affect their outdoor mobility, engagement, and social participation. So we have been focusing on participants mostly in Metro Vancouver. Overall, we have 32 community dwelling individuals who participated in our study who are living with mild to moderate dementia or mild cognitive impairment. And in some cases, when they're more moderate levels of dementia, they had their care partners involved in our study. So as is mentioned here, in Metro Vancouver, we had 26 participants, 11 individuals, and 15 dyads. Obviously, the person living with dementia and their care partner. Quite often, it's a family member, typically a spouse. And then we wanted to expand the geographic context, because if you talk about BC, the urban form changes when you get into the interior and north. So Prince George is representing the so-called north of BC. Very different urban form compared to Metro Vancouver. Also, weather is different. Yes, real winter in Canada. So we have 6 participants and dyads from Prince George area. And thanks to our UNBC team for that portion of the study. So overall, 32 participants, and people who work with, those of you who are involved in working with people with dementia, in terms of research, you can appreciate that there are multiple issues that we have to consider in terms of recruitment. And we don't have the time for that, but it took a lot of time and effort for our team to reach out to different community centers, adult day programs, and so on, to reach out these 32 individuals. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is to give you a quick overview of the methods that we employed. We had 4 sessions. We collected a lot of data with each individual with lived experience. And the data were collected across 4 sessions. And the first session was a sit-down interview where we used some structured questionnaires, a tool called Act Out, which is validated and used in Europe, also in Canada. We collected the temporal spatial patterns of out-of-home activity and through that instrument, but also collected walking routine. Where do people walk typically, and so on. So just getting the context. Session 2 was diving deeper, asking about their attitudes, perceptions, and walking experience, and being aware of environmental context of where they walk, what did they notice, and so on. So that was also used, that session was also used to identify a walking route that is where we did walk along or go along interviews, right? So these are interviews that are we're walking with the person with dementia, and sometimes they care partners as well, and then video recording and photo documenting, and also talking. So a lot of things going on at the same time. And the goal was to understand how the individuals were perceiving, understanding, interacting with the neighborhood environment. So this was a fairly major operation to plan and execute. And as you can see on the left-hand side, that's Carrie, our project manager right here. She's going to present in a short while. And on the right-hand side, you can get a sense of what's happening. And the person on the right-hand side with a brown jacket is Kishore. Kishore was our first, like a research team member 1, along with an individual living with dementia who was the participant. And behind them are 2 additional research team members who were doing, collecting, doing photo documentation and video recording. In many cases, actual participants also had the camera on their head as well. So we got vantage point. And we'll see that when we see the video that Carrie is going to show at the very end of our session. And finally, in the session 4 was a follow-up to the walk-along, which is basically showing them some of the clips that we identified as from the video that was collected during the walk-along, and asking for them to reflect on those videos and diving deeper as in a sit-down position, something they could explain more. So these are the 4 sessions that we had with each participant. We have in our project 3 knowledge mobilization resources, and we're going to present 2 of them on this session. The first one is a design and planning guide, thanks to Happy Cities team. We developed a planning and design guide to inform municipal partners, other organizations. This is really where the rubber hits the road. What can we do with the data? What can we do the knowledge generated? That's where we need municipal partners like Burnaby and Richmond and so on. So that is one important resource that was developed from this project. And then a short video, which is a promotional educational information video to broadly engage community partners organizations about awareness raising about what are the challenges people with lived experience have when they are out and about in the community. And finally, we have an environmental audit tool that was developed with another project, a MAP project, with the lead of Dr. Atia Mahmood, where we had developed an easy-to-use planning guide, easy-to-use audit tool that can be used by people with lived experience or lay people in identifying problems, challenges in their communities. So as we go along with presentations, you'll see some of these resources, but also how they are going to be used as we move forward. So I'll end with a photo of our team. That's our Demscape team. All right, thank you. I'll pass it on to Kishore.
Thank you, Habib. My name is Kishore. I am a research coordinator for the Demscape project, and I'm also a PhD candidate in the Department of Gerontology here at SFU. I'm very pleased to be part of this symposium and be sharing some initial findings from the semi-structured interviews that we conducted with people living with dementia and their care partners in Metro Vancouver. And I'll also be sharing some methodological reflections from the data collection that we conducted last year with our participants. So this is to just give you a roadmap of the presentation. I'll first talk a little bit about the preliminary findings from the semi-structured interviews, and then segue into reflections on methods that we employed for data collection. The sample of participants that we're going to be focusing in this part of the presentation are 26 community-dwelling people living with mild to moderate dementia or mild cognitive impairment and their care partners in the Metro Vancouver region. And the findings come primarily from the second, third, and fourth sessions in the sequential interviews that were conducted with participants. So the initial semi-structured interview, the walk-along interview that was video and photo documented, and the final sit-down interview. So we were interested in unpacking the different aspects of our participants' outdoor walking experience. So we focused on the physical, the cognitive, the psychological and emotional, the social and the temporal aspects, and grouped some of the key themes into these 5 broad categories. And we're going to be looking at a subset of the themes shown here on this slide. So diving in, first participants identified various environmental features that facilitate or hindered their walks. First, participants talked about walking on flat terrain, which enabled their walks, while areas with a steep slope were generally avoided. Street lighting was deemed useful by our participants, and they also talked about avoiding walking in snowy or icy conditions, as well as in extreme heat. So weather was one of the key factors that determined their walking route and choices. Participants also preferred walking on smooth, even surfaces, and displaced sidewalk slabs, steps, and curbs were seen as trip hazards. The photo on the slide was taken on a walk-along interview with an 87-year-old participant with Parkinson's and dementia. He talked about having to be careful while walking in parts of his neighborhood where tree roots had lifted the sidewalk slabs, creating unevennesses. The participants also identified insufficient space on the sidewalk as an issue due to narrow width and permanent or temporary obstacles found along the way. Clean, well-maintained seats on or near the sidewalk were found to support participants who required frequent rest breaks during the walk. Accessibility features like ramps, handrails, and balustrades were considered essential safety features and helped them access level differences. Finally, participants talked about pedestrian signals and crosswalks being useful for crossing streets in busy areas particularly, and insufficient signal crossing time hindered their safe and comfortable walking experience. Moving along, participants spoke also about their familiarity and understanding of the neighborhood environment. A key part of maintaining familiarity involved taking the same route to destinations in the community. Familiarity with the neighborhood allowed participants to comfortably take different routes, including shortcuts to and from destinations. Route familiarity was seen as a product of taking the routes to the destinations many times and learning them through repetition over time. Living in the neighborhood for a long period of time and maintaining a consistent walking routine over time were found to support participants' knowledge of the environment and their sense of familiarity. Participants defined their mental map of an area by fixing boundaries based on key streets in their neighborhood, which in turn helped them orient themselves while walking outside. And corners and street intersections were also used to identify which street they were on. Street names and block numbers were also used by our participants to help them orient themselves to their location in the neighborhood. However, this was not always without issues. The photo on the slide was taken during a walk-along interview with a 73-year-old participant with Lewy body dementia. He is shown pointing at an intersection near his house that he had trouble identifying because he found it harder to retain and remember street numbers as opposed to street names. Participants also shared how the neighborhood environment promotes orientation and wayfinding when they go out for walks. They talked about clear sight lines on the street, helping them orient themselves in their location in the neighborhood and ascertain directions to community destinations. Landmarks were found to make the neighborhood familiar and served as spatial anchors. These include houses, local businesses and amenities, and public art. They helped participants recognize their surroundings, locate their destination, and confirm that the route they were on was the correct one. Landmarks at choice points where participants had to make a wayfinding decision were particularly helpful. The photo on this slide was taken during a walk-along interview with a 73-year-old participant with mild cognitive impairment. As she pointed at a public artwork that she found to be visually interesting and distinctive. She went on to say that she searched for this particular sculpture when she walked in the area, as it provided her with orientation and wayfinding prompts to get to nearby destinations. Participants mentioned not always needing landmarks for wayfinding and orientation due to their familiarity with the neighborhood environment. Having a clear purpose and destination in mind for their outdoor walks was deemed sufficient to let them know how to get there. Participants also shared positive insights about the social aspects of their outdoor walking experience. Social interaction with passers-by, neighbors, and local businesses helped enhance their outdoor walking experience and contributed towards participants' sense of community. In this photo, this was taken during a walk-along interview as well. The participant observed a dog with its owner sitting outside a restaurant and stopped to talk to the owner about the dog. She later mentioned that she was prone to doing this quite often on her walks in the community, as she was a people's person and was drawn to animals. Generally, most participants observed and interacted with infants, kids, and pets while walking outside, citing them as triggers for social interaction with passers-by. Participants also talked about dementia sensitivity in the neighborhood, describing their neighbors' dementia awareness and friendly and kind attitudes. Local businesses were also credited as being dementia friendly and offering respite and refuge when most needed. Participants mentioned feeling free and willing to ask passers-by and neighbors for help with wayfinding or crossing the street, and being in areas with eyes on the street particularly contributed towards participants' perceived sense of safety. Participants also spoke about the importance of including people with dementia and enabling their right to participate in the outdoors. And they talked about the importance of giving feedback to their city and raising access issues with planners and decision makers to help them take positive measures towards creating inclusive neighborhoods. Now I'd like to share with you a few reflections on the methods that we employed for data collection. The walk-along interviews were particularly helpful in allowing us to observe participants' spontaneous route planning and decision-making, as well as their perceptions while on the move. Having the camera on that Habib showed in his presentation and talking about walking in the neighborhood made participants more conscious of elements in their surroundings that they had not previously noticed, and enabled them to appraise and reflect on how the environment shaped their outdoor walking experience. We found that allowing for moments of silence created space for participants' self-directed observations, as well as their reflections during the walk-along interview. In turn, letting them take the lead and determining the course of the conversation. In interviews with dyads, the presence of the family caregiver was instrumental in helping participants recall significant events and experiences in their neighborhood. Video elicitation in the final sit-down interview was helpful in enabling participants recall what was seen or said during the walk-along interview and build on those insights. Conducting the interview akin to an informal conversation helped participants open up, especially given that the topic was not top of mind for most of them, and helped them engage in the conversation more freely. While the walk and talk approach of the walk-along interview appealed to most of our participants, there were some for whom the method wasn't the ideal fit. Some preferred to stay quiet while walking, which meant that the interview was less conversation-focused and more observation-based. Interviews with dyads, where the care partner is the primary informant, for example, in one case where the participant had aphasia, also called for an observation-based approach and taking note of the participants' nonverbal gestures as their care partner shared insights. An advantage of the sequential format of interviews is that participants got more comfortable and familiar with the research process after each subsequent interview, which enabled them to participate more freely in the research process. Also, conducting multiple interviews with each participant allowed us to apply our knowledge from previous interviews towards subsequent interviews. This was useful to build on insights shared in past interviews and develop more nuanced understandings of the participants' lived experience. In conclusion, this study focused on exploring the outdoor walking experience of people living with dementia and how the neighborhood environment shapes their experience of the outdoors. Preliminary analysis of the semi-structured interview data suggests that the neighborhood environment shapes physical aspects of the outdoor walking experience by facilitating or hindering participants' access to the outdoors. The environment plays a key role in terms of cognitive aspects of the outdoor walking experience by promoting familiarity, orientation, and wayfinding. And finally, it supports positive social interaction and provides social support to the participant while walking outside. Adopting a flexible, person-centered, multi-method approach with a strong visual research component has strengths and challenges, but the advantages far outweigh the limitations. This approach helped us meaningfully engage with people living with dementia and their care partners and helped unpack their experiences and place relations in the neighborhood environment. Thank you very much.
This is always an issue for me. Hi everyone, my name is Emma Avery. I'm an urban planner and communications specialist at Happy Cities. And we were very excited to collaborate with the Demscape project to help produce the Dementia Inclusive Planning and Design Guidelines. That's good. So Happy Cities is a Vancouver-based urban planning, design, and research firm. And we are focused on creating happier, healthier, more inclusive communities. And we know from research and experience that the way that we design our cities can make or break human well-being. And when we talk about well-being, we're taking a holistic approach, thinking about many aspects, including happiness, joy, ease, social connection, physical health, sense of belonging, and more. So we created the guidelines through a 4-step process, beginning with a research and literature review that included academic literature, gray literature, and a review of relevant municipal policy, planning, and design guidelines around dementia-inclusive and dementia-friendly design. We also conducted a series of interviews with municipal planners in Metro Vancouver to hear about their existing initiatives, including opportunities and challenges around dementia-friendly design. And then finally, we held a community forum here at SFU earlier this year, where we invited community members, people with lived experience, advocates, municipal planners, and policymakers, as well as researchers to share feedback and input on a draft version of the guidelines to make sure that we were capturing everything that was important to people with lived experience. And so through this approach, we really sought to combine both evidence and best practices and research with also experience and subjective feedback. And finally, through these 3 steps, we created the Dementia Inclusive Planning and Design Guidelines, which I'll share a little bit more about in this presentation, including the impact they can have for people living with dementia. So a little bit about the guidelines. They're a toolkit of urban design strategies and actions that municipalities, developers, and other community members can implement to create more dementia-friendly neighborhoods and communities. And they really focus on the design of the built environment, so that includes things like streets, public spaces, building edges and entrances, parks, transit infrastructure, and more. And although they are really focused on creating a built environment that's inclusive and welcoming and comfortable for people living with dementia, as one person at the community forum mentioned, dementia-friendly is everyone-friendly, meaning that the strategies and actions in these guidelines really have the potential to improve well-being for all community members. So the key audiences for the guidelines primarily is municipalities who have the power to implement these, but they're also intended for developers, for community organizations, and for people with lived experience and their care partners to help them understand how the built environment works at a planning and design level. And the guidelines are based around 6 key principles for dementia-friendly and inclusive design. So these are familiar, meaning features that people have seen before and can easily recognize. Comfortable, meaning places that are peaceful, quiet, places to stop, rest, and socialize. Accessible, meaning that someone of any age and any ability can access the space or building. Distinct, meaning that features of the built environment are varied and interesting and distinct from one to the next. Legible, meaning that people can easily recognize and understand the purpose of a building or a space. And safe, meaning that people don't experience fears or risks when they're navigating the built environment and their neighborhood. So the design guidelines are broken down into 3 realms. The first is the neighborhood scale, which concerns high-level planning decisions that municipalities can take. The second is the street scale, which is medium-scale decisions that focus on pedestrian and street networks. And third is the detailed design scale, which discusses design of the microenvironment and supportive amenities, so things like furniture, surface materials, etc. And under each design realm, we have selected a series of strategies based on our research, which are high-level categories of action to implement dementia-friendly design in the built environment. And under each strategy, we have a subset of specific actions that municipalities and other organizations can take. And these are specific examples of how to implement dementia-inclusive design. So I'll just take you through a few examples. As mentioned, Realm 1, the neighborhood scale, includes guidance on high-level planning decisions. So this includes land use designation, street grids, building form, transit routes, and open spaces. So an example of a strategy at the neighborhood scale is land use designation. So the guidelines recommend walkable access to community spaces and primary services. And what's really required to implement this is mixed-use zoning, so that things like local businesses, shops, restaurants, pharmacies, health clinics, community centers can be integrated in the neighborhoods that people live in and on the streets they live on, so that they're close to home and within walking distance. And this is really important to maintain accessible environments, so having shorter distances to essential services can help people access them more easily. As well as it also helps create distinct environments because people can recognize local shops, they can get to know the people who work there, and use these as landmarks to help navigate around the neighborhood. And next we have the street scale, which is mid-scale design decisions for pedestrian and road networks. So this includes pedestrian paths and sidewalks, pedestrian crossings, building edges and entrances, transit stops, and parking and drop-off. So one strategy that was highlighted as very important during the community forum among people with lived experience was safe pedestrian paths and sidewalks. Specifically, this means both direct on-street and off-street pleasant routes that connect people to key destinations. And so the guidelines include specific recommendations around designing safe, accessible, and wide sidewalks and crosswalks, including recommended sidewalk widths, recommended elements to create accessible and safe crossings, and more. And then finally, we have the detailed design scale, which is design of the microenvironment and supportive amenities. So this includes many different types of features, including seating, public art, placemaking, public toilets, signage, ground treatments, grade or level changes, lighting, acoustics, and vegetation. So one example of a really important strategy at this scale is seating. We provide guidance on how to design seating that's comfortable, accessible, and familiar, that's placed frequently along city streets and in public spaces, in shaded areas that are pleasant spaces to rest in, and nearby to greenery or other interesting features or views, such as a view of a fountain, the ocean, a playground, or otherwise. And seating is really important for people living with dementia because they can feel overwhelmed in complex or loud urban environments. So having quiet places to rest can be really important to helping them feel comfortable and safe when navigating the neighborhood. And they can also crucially provide spaces for social connection to help people maintain connections to their community. So we do provide more specific guidance in the guidelines themselves about accessible seat heighting, materials, form, and placement. And then finally, an example of a more fun and creative set of strategies that the guidelines include is around public art and placemaking. So this is something that was also highlighted as really important to people at the community forum. It can contribute to a sense of meaning and belonging when it's created together with the community. For people living with dementia, it can help trigger memories and offer landmarks for wayfinding. It can be both small and large scale. So you'll see on the left there, we have some pictures of string lights, a little free lending library, and also a community painted mural on a local traffic barrier. And they can also be large scale elements. So for example, in the diagram, we have flexible spaces for community events, places for people to play games, host barbecues, and more. And these can really also help spark social connection, whether through co-creation or just encouraging people to pause and linger in a space. And what I've tried to show through this presentation is how these strategies and actions really work together in combination with one another. So one idea that we suggest in the guidelines for implementation is to create a dementia-friendly path as a pilot project to test and implement the strategies and actions. So we know that there are a lot of strategies and actions in these guidelines. I think it's nearly 70 actions in total. But we suggest that municipalities can start by creating at minimum one safe walking and rolling route in each neighborhood that prioritizes elements of dementia-friendly, dementia-inclusive design. So in this diagram here, you see things like housing integrated with the community center. You see both wide sidewalks on the street and pleasant walking paths off the street, various forms of placemaking, greenery, places to sit, places to have fun and play, and much more. So the key takeaway really that we want to emphasize is that neighborhood planning and design have immense power to boost well-being and inclusion for people living with dementia. And in order to implement these guidelines, we recommend that municipalities can work with community organizations, people with lived experience, and care partners to identify high-priority design strategies and actions, so recognizing that in different contexts, different strategies or actions may be more needed, and to identify community areas or hotspots that would benefit from pilot projects, and finally, to share stories about the impact of dementia-inclusive design. So if you would like to see a copy of the guidelines, they're available for free to download online on our website, happycities.com, as well as on the Demscape SFU website. Thank you very much.
Okay, I benefit from this podium as well. Okay, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name's Rebecca Mahaffey and I work at the City of Burnaby, as was referenced. So I have a couple of different hats. I work as an urban planner. I've worked for the city for a long time, and previous to that I worked with the province with their age-friendly communities initiative. And so it's a real pleasure to have worked in this space for quite a long time. I'm also executive director of the newly launched, it's just a year-old, Civic Innovation Lab, which is a partnership between SFU and the City of Burnaby, which attempts to narrow the gap in knowledge mobilization between research and actually being able to test and implement it within municipal work, municipal planning, and other aspects of city operations as well, of course. And then my final role with SFU is as an adjunct prof with the School of Resource and Environmental Management, and I have a lot of fun working with the students in that program. So I'm here today to share some of my experiences about working with dementia-friendly planning and my connection in with the Demscape project and the connection of the City of Burnaby. So just quickly for context, I wanted to share a little bit from a process perspective how the city has engaged in the area of access and inclusion and working with community members. So since the late 80s, the city's had an access and inclusion advisory group. This started out deliberately as a staff-led group, which was a subcommittee of a committee of council. Some of that may sound a little bit like gobbledygook, but it was done deliberately because it allowed for a more informal and iterative conversation process between planners such as myself and community members. And so members of that advisory group were either folks with disabilities or dementia living in the communities themselves, or who had close family members, or who worked for a local organization. Just this past year, it's morphed into a full committee of council, and that's as a result of the Accessible BC legislation, which recently came into force. And so the committee needed greater powers in municipal decision making. And so now it's chaired by a councillor for the City of Burnaby. And throughout the whole tenure of these various groups, the focuses of, the perspectives of people with dementia have always been included informally, but became more explicit in 2016 when the city engaged in some dementia-friendly community planning. And so the Burnaby does have a dementia-friendly community action plan, which was developed within the policy planning group and is now being implemented by our community planners who actually work with developers to build, and also by other aspects of the community, such as of the city, such as recreation. So the work began in 2016 when the city received some funding from the United BC Municipalities, or UBCM, age-friendly community planning and project grants stream to develop the plan, and we worked with Alzheimer's Society of BC, their Dementia-Friendly Communities Initiative. And this has been a really important piece of work to guide city efforts in this area, and has also provided the framework for us to engage with projects like Demscape. And so to find a copy of the plan, a quick Google will let you find it, and it's also available in the city, directly from the City of Burnaby website. So how the plan was developed, we had a variety of community focus groups, staff focus groups, walking assessments. You can see me, I'm ready to leap up there. We had a great time walking around the different parts of the community to assess our pedestrian and built environments. And we also had a larger community forum. And overall, the work was guided by a community-based advisory group, which, once the plan was completed, merged with the existing Access and Advisory Committee that I referenced earlier. And at that point, including a dementia informed perspective was made explicit in the terms of reference. And this is continued into the existing Committee of Council, which is now in place. And so there is a community member on that committee that represents that perspective and has been really crucial in informing decision making. I should have noted when I showed that first slide that both the advisory group and the Committee of Council plays a key role in a lot of strategic decisions that the city makes. Everything from reviewing plans for new community centers, we have quite detailed design review sessions, to providing input on new policies and programs. Oops, sorry, jumped over there. So the plan, the sizing of this chart is not great, I apologize, so I'll read it out. So the actual plan itself has 4 areas of action. The first is people and knowledge, to increase knowledge and understanding of dementia, resources and programs for community members of all ages, city staff, and our businesses. Next category is things to do, so supportive programming for folks with dementia and caregivers to stay active and engaged. The third category is your surroundings, so environments to support activity, safety and accessibility, signs and landmarks, and quiet spaces. And the last is other or advocacy, home visits and respite support, and seniors clinic and resource hubs. And so all of the various categories and actions within the plan are slotted underneath these categories. And just for the sake of time, I'll just provide a series of highlights in the next slides of what we've attempted to undertake to implement the plan. So for the first area of work, people and knowledge and your surroundings, so the first 2 areas. So for people and knowledge, we've mostly focused on providing information and training to city staff. That's been our greatest area of success, particularly with focus on the tax department and people and recreation, so folks that are engaging with community members directly. So you may find tax interesting, but we heard feedback during development of the plan that a lot of frontline clerks who were helping people pay their taxes were encountering people living in the community with dementia who found the kind of fraught decision-making and complex processes of paying taxes, applying for homeowner grants, et cetera, really daunting. And that difficult financial situations were occurring as a result of them perhaps not completing those tasks or not completing those tasks by the deadline. And so the tax staff received quite detailed training. I want to thank the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia for support with that training to be able to help them to provide customized supports and to set up processes within their workflows to be able to do that so that people can meet with staff individually and work through the processes with supports to pay their taxes and apply for the appropriate grants. Also in the recreation department, of course, particularly our seniors centers, although in all of our spaces, folks are regularly encountering people with dementia and their care partners, and so this education has been really key. In terms of people and surroundings, we like to walk around Burnaby, and we like to walk around Burnaby with community members. So you'll see a couple of pictures here. The one on the far side there includes the mayor in the middle, a variety of planning and engineering staff, and folks from the community. And so this particular project is, or that particular picture is from the city's involvement in another project, the Mobility, Access and Participation Project, particularly the sub-component of that SWAN, Stakeholders Wheelability and Walkability Assessment, is the N for network for folks in the community who, in the neighborhood, thank you, I blanked on the N. Anyway, the city of Burnaby has been engaged in that project for a number of years, and it's been a true pleasure, and we've really learned a lot through that that method of gathering lived experience and data, and so it's directly informed our capital planning processes. And actually, there's another round of data collection that'll be presented to city staff this summer, and so that's really crucial. Things like, where do we need a curb cut, or what's the priority for the curb cut? Where do we need another signalized intersection? That kind of really granular data is really helpful. But even outside of these particular focused research opportunities, The City of Burnaby for a number of years regularly organizes through the Access and Inclusion Advisory Group, and now the Committee of Council organizes these opportunities. And when we can, we do them with local schools. And so it's a really wonderful intergenerational opportunity as well. Okay, the next two areas, things to do and community support. So I've included a couple of example pictures here, but I want to be clear that the city is engaged more in the background of supporting this work to happen. The outward-facing, hard and crucial work is done by the nonprofits in our Burnaby community, such as the Burnaby Seniors Outreach Society that runs the Dementia-Friendly Cafe. Where the city gets engaged is in funding for the nonprofits and also providing them space to do their work. So the City of Burnaby, like most other cities in the Lower Mainland, through the development process, obtains density bonus from developers. So in exchange for extra density, say 5 more stories on the tower, you have to pay for and build a community asset. And so in Burnaby, for the last number of years, we've focused on building community nonprofit resource centers. So there's one in Brentwood, there's several in Metrotown, and then nonprofits, local nonprofits, at a very reduced rate are able to lease space, which lowers their overhead so they can provide more programs. So we're very much in the background, but it's still, we're a player in supporting those programs to exist. Also more directly, the City of Burnaby, and this is a bit more unique, at least in my experience of local governments, has a suite of programs called Citizen Support Services, where we work, it's more direct programming. So those are the pictures on the bottom. There's a grocery shop program, there's a telephone visit program, there's a in-person, now that some of the restrictions around the pandemic have started to ease, in-person support program, and a variety of other programs, out trips, social opportunities. These are not necessarily specific for folks with dementia, but the staff that are engaged in those are highly trained in supporting and enabling folks with dementia to participate along with their care participants. Specifically on Demscape, through under the auspices of the Dementia Friendly Community Plan, and also through the additional staff support that we're able to get through the Civic Innovation Lab, the City of Burnaby is involved in the Demscape project, and it's been a true pleasure. We've learned a lot. Being engaged allowed us to refocus energy. It's been a number of years since the dementia-friendly plan was approved, and it allowed us to reanimate elements of those plans which perhaps had not been acted on initially. Also, I must say that the design guidelines are extremely useful. I like how practical and detailed they are, and the variety of scale is really helpful for folks like myself who are working in the development process. And as I mentioned before, related projects such as the MAP project, they inform city capital planning and pedestrian realm improvements. A little bit of reflection, possibilities and challenges. As usual, it's both sides of the coin for a lot of these. So possibilities, we have a political moment in British Columbia with the Accessible BC legislation. There's pending changes to the BC Building Code, which I'm very hopeful about. And also, more specifically in Burnaby, we have a progressive council at the moment, and so staff are hopeful that we'll be able to move a lot of initiatives forward more quickly than we've been able to in the past. Also, the scale and breadth of development, there's a lot of opportunity to build the comfortable spaces that were alluded to in the previous presentation. We have new civic facilities, so we're in the midst of building 2 new community centers, a new arena, a new pool, like it goes on and on. We are spending billions of dollars on new assets, and so being able to build those to a high standard of accessibility and inclusion is a really exciting opportunity. And the committee that I've referenced several times is engaged in those detailed design reviews. Staff engagement and also community awareness, I'm lumping those together just because there's more awareness generally in the community, which speaks to the work that many of you do in raising just empathy and awareness around the experience of folks with dementia and how to include them in the community in community life. In terms of challenges, scale and breadth of development. Basically, anyone who lives in the Lower Mainland will know big swaths of it, or one big construction site, feels like forever. It goes on and on and on. And particularly, so landmarks disappear. This is a big one. We might be creating new ones with public art, but there's a period of transition there which is very difficult to navigate. And also maintaining accessible pathways around development is very difficult. All cities have requirements, but actually making sure that they exist and doing the enforcement to make sure they continue to exist over the lifespan of the construction project is difficult. And as all of you will know, by attempting to navigate our communities, often they're not fully implemented. Staff turnover, of course. It's not only in the UK with Brexit that you experience staffing challenges. Local governments also have huge staffing challenges, and there's a lot of staff turnover, and so you invest in training and will continue to do so. But with each key position that turns over, you lose that capacity. Also, community isolation and climate change and emergency preparedness. I really appreciated the content in the keynote on this point. It's really important, and we haven't fully, at least at the local government level, sorted out how to act on that in a community inclusive way. We're learning as we go, because the scale of what we're experiencing is happening so much more quickly than I think we'd anticipated. And so, for example, those of you who are local will remember, of course, the heat dome that happened 2 years ago, and just general hot weather. You know, this May has been very hot. So in Burnaby, unfortunately, we experienced a high number of deaths, third highest in the province, 60 plus. I'm sure it's more than that, but that's what we've been able to specifically document. A good third of those were 70 plus, folks who are living alone. And a lot of Burnaby affordable housing is older stock, which does not include air conditioning, for example, may not have proper ventilation. It was built in a time of our building code, which was intended to retain heat and retain light in a different climate than now. And so that's a really a difficult problem for how the local government can just empathize with our community who's gone through this crisis and is going through this ongoing crisis, but also act to hopefully prevent future experiences of that scale. And so we are doing some work at the local level, supporting it through Burnaby Neighbourhood House, and I'm hopeful, but I'm also really interested in any other research or recommendations which folks in this room may be able to share. And I'll also share one more that's not on the slide. It came up in the previous presentation. It twigged with me. Public washrooms. In the North American context where we don't staff them, public washrooms often tend to be dirty and potentially dangerous places. I'm generalizing, but it's a real challenge that we experience in the city of Burnaby. They're constantly vandalized, like actually set on fire sometimes. They're a trouble to keep clean, and in an effort to build ones that can be easily clean, they tend to be sort of concrete boxes. You've all been in those in public parks, which can sort of be hosed down. They're not very pleasant places to be in. And so again, I'd appreciate any research or context or suggestions that folks have for how local governments can build safe, friendly public toilets. And maybe it's as simple as we need to embrace a staffed model of public washrooms. But genuinely, I'd be very interested in thoughts on that point. But I will finish it there because I think I've taken more than my time. This is my contact information, although you can find me on the city website as well. I'm happy to answer questions or to engage further with you in conversation. Thank you.
Okay, I might be a little tall for the platform, but we can work with this. Hi everyone, my name's Carrie Randa. I am the project manager on Demscape, and I'm also a master's student in the Department of Gerontology at SFU. And I'm really excited to get to talk a little bit about our knowledge mobilization video today. So the purpose of this video is to educate on the role of built environment as an essential component of dementia-friendly and inclusive communities. It's also to challenge stereotypes of what it means to be a person living with dementia in Canadian neighborhoods, and to inspire action that includes persons living with dementia in municipal decision-making and planning processes. The video was developed with 3 key stakeholder groups in mind. So the first being governmental organizations, such as the Public Health Agency of Canada, Dementia Friendly Communities Canada, Health Canada, and not to forget our non-governmental organizations like Alzheimer's Society of BC and Alzheimer's Society of Canada, as well as the Office of the Seniors Advocate. The second group being municipal planners, urban designers, and educators. And third, and definitely an important group, being people living with dementia, their care partners, and the general public, with the goal of inspiring hope, optimism, and engagement. So our video showcases 3 of our Demscape study participants with mobility, engagement, and participation challenges and successes in their neighborhoods, including adaptation strategies and agency and maintenance of independent functioning and well-being. This video also documents openness to engage, or for persons living with dementia to engage in advocacy and awareness-raising community-engaged research initiatives that do challenge stereotypes, and also really embodies the spirit of Canada's Dementia Strategic Plan. So as mentioned throughout our presentations this morning, data was collected in Metro Vancouver as well as Prince George. So in our video, we really wanted to include stories from both locations. So in Metro Vancouver, we had 1 individual in Richmond and 1 dyad in South Vancouver and 1 dyad in Prince George. A little bit about our participant selection process. So participants were invited to film based on recommendations of our research assistants who facilitated their interviews, and reviewing the walk-along footage with our pre-production and videography team. So we were really looking for communication skills, charisma, of course, consent and interest to be filmed, as well as engagement with the built environment during their walk-along interviews. So you might see in our video hands moving in and out of the frames, pointing and really highlighting those features. And then finally, each participant met with our videography team to go through any questions and make a plan for filming in mid-October in Metro Vancouver, which we were incredibly lucky with the weather for. It was a sunny 15-degree day. And in Prince George in November, the snow held off until I think the day after we filmed. So 2 versions of the video have been produced, a 1.5-minute teaser for social media, and then an 8-minute short doc that we're ecstatic to debut today. So without further ado, let's watch it.
Awesome. So we will walk both of us first, and then both of them will follow. Right on.
Because of my disease, I'm not able to drive. I like to get out in the fresh air. I think that that's important for my health and well-being, getting the blood pumping to my brain.
Walking is really good for you, you know, and good for your mind, good for your brain, and good for your physical. I walk everywhere in here. Walk to shopping in the Victoria Drive, and walk to see the doctor, and walk to see the dentist, walk to see get the medicine.
Realized right from the beginning that there was something not quite right, and it's gradually gotten worse, but I accept it because it's part of life. I'm old enough and good looking enough that I can accept that sort of thing, and you can quit snickering.
My neighborhood is convenient because it does offer, within walking distance, a lot of amenities that I need, and that's important to me. The 3 things that are important are social connectiveness, having a lot of friends, talking, keeping your brain active, socializing. The other thing is exercise, having the blood pump to the brain. And then the other thing is having a passion. So if you have a passion, then you have a purpose in life, and I think that's really helpful, especially with a diagnosis of dementia.
Oh, I think, well, it's important at any time, really, but I think you need to keep moving, because if you're just sedentary, Doesn't take long. If you don't use it, you lose it.
That's the same with your brain.
Yeah.
See, in this road, I get lost.
Is it here?
Yeah. See, because I turn back here, it's more small tree, right? Shade. It's not that hot. That day is really hot. Maybe like you said, too hot. Just make me confused. Recently, 2 times I get lost. You know, one time I go to Wall, the Vancouver's mayor. You know, and then when I come out, I just, which way to go? I'm very nervous. And then one time, and then very hot, the summer very hot one day, you know, and then I go to ESL class, and then when I come out, I go to walk different way, you know, I supposed to go to the, you know, to the 48th Avenue and then turn to the Neighbourhood. And then when I go in, I say, where am I? I get lost. The house all different, and the trees different, roads different, everything different. They plant a young tree here some years ago, you know. Then they build a new thing here not very long ago. I think 3 years ago. And then I am so nervous. I don't know what to do. And then I run, almost running to the, and then I see the Neighbourhood Park, and then, now I know where I am. If I see the Neighbourhood Park, you know, the side there, if I see the park, and then I know I'm home pretty soon. So they write down that Neighbourhood Park, that's very clear. Yeah. I like clear. Sometimes they think that.
Oh, the sign you
See,
mean?
the sign very clear.
Right.
That's why that day I get lost. I see the Neighbourhood Park, I'm very comfortable. I know the park have the bathroom. And then more easy for me, you know, to go to bathroom. No, before 7 years ago, I'm okay. I don't have to go bathroom that often. But now recently, you know, I have to go bathroom all the time. I get lost 2 times already. So I'm worried I get worse, you know, later, so.
I think there has to be very good signage at intersections. What they're doing now is putting even on bus shelters, the cross sections, so that people know where they are. On the street, there is a fluorescent, it shines in the dark, the name of the street, the cross section, both ways. You can see where you are. I think that in the middle of Richmond, there's some intersections that have yellow markings when you're coming up to a curb. That's helpful. Some of the challenges, for the most part, would be the sidewalks are a little bit uneven and have dips and bumps and cracks. So that you have to be very careful not to trip. I have to make sure I lift my feet up and watch where I'm going so I don't fall. I have fallen a couple times in the past with that.
Well, a lot of times people will ride their bikes on the sidewalk.
That happens to us.
Yeah, and it's hard because they just come up on you, and I have a sometimes I weave a bit, you know, so they, you know, go one side or the other with unconsciously, and they might hit me, and almost have hit me, you know.
You find the odd branch that you don't want to trip on. But
Right.
that's about it. No sidewalk, keep left facing traffic.
Yep. At this corner here, where do you go or how do you get back to your place from here?
Straight along here.
So you walk along the grass here?
Oh yeah.
Yeah? And why do you choose to do that?
So I don't have to go across the gate on the sidewalk. Sometimes I go over there on the sidewalk, but I don't walk along the road if I don't absolutely have to. No matter where you go in North America, it is geared to driving. It is not geared to walking.
You guys mentioned that you fell a couple times. Are there things like that that you get concerned about?
Yes, because if I step in there the wrong way, without having Charlie with me, if I step in there the wrong way, then I could go
Okay.
face
He
first.
didn't have the walker when he fell.
Okay.
That's why we made it.
Yes, and you feel more comfortable
I feel
with.
more comfortable about it.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
she feels right about it, I do it.
Right.
You don't want to step in a pothole. The only thing I can really say about this whole scenario, it might not help me, it might not help her, but hopefully it will help somebody else.
Thanks, everyone. It's so great to finally put it out into the world after lots of hard work and such a huge team effort. So it's one thing to make a knowledge mobilization tool. It's another thing to try and sustain that engagement. So as a consideration, we've developed a proposed MyTax supported knowledge mobilization project, which involves our amazing municipal partners, the City of Burnaby and City of Richmond, to develop 3 discussion guides for our stakeholder groups through World Cafe discussions co-hosted with community partners, as well sharing the short film at local and national film festivals. So taking a moment to send a huge thank you to our video participants, Lynn Jackson, Esther and Chung Yoon, and Niels and Maureen Nielsen. They were amazing to work with, and I think their personalities show through in the video so much. Also a major shout out to post-production and editing by Eric Sanderson, as well as pre-production and sit-down interviews by Callista Otoni and Farzine McRae. And finally, after all of these amazing presentations, we do have QR codes to the design and planning guide, the short video, the teaser, as well as the long form version. And the videos posted to our website, as well as YouTube. So please share widely. If you're interested in using it as a teaching tool, go for it. That's what we made it for. And then as well, the design and planning guide is also available on Happy City's website with the neighborhood audit tool to come over the summer. So please don't hesitate to get all of our links from our poster back there. And thank you. It's been wonderful to finally share this video.
Okay, we'll have some Q&A now. So feel free to come up here. I'll try to fix this. Get set up here for someone a little shorter than me. But James, you want to? So questions? Excellent presentations. They were fascinating. Loved the video. And here we go. Leslie's going to go first. Then.
I'm Leslie Godet. I'm with Langley Seniors in Action and very closely with the Langley Seniors Resource Society, as well as being president of Costco. My question is, it was very interesting to see that Burnaby is funding nonprofits to do this kind of work. And we were at a Chamber of Commerce meeting in Langley last week where the 2 mayors spoke. And Langley, of course, is very focused on providing housing because we're the fastest growing municipality in BC. But when a question was asked, well, you're building all this physical infrastructure, what about the social infrastructure? It ended up being responded to, well, that's a provincial responsibility. So why is Burnaby different? But I loved all the presentations. They were absolutely excellent. Thank you.
So that's a great question. And unfortunately, at least my answer, it's a political reality. It hasn't always been that case in Burnaby, but the current council and the council before this have been, I have to be careful as a local government worker here, have been more progressive than perhaps in the past. And so they have committed funding in areas which has not always been politically viable. And so I recognize that's a difficult answer because it's not easy to just lift from one community to another, but that's part of the political window which I referenced in the opportunities section. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Ziying Zhang. I'm a PhD student in the department. I just want to ask, what is the physical capability of all your participants? Because I see you do work-along interviews. Does it mean that all your participants can walk independently? And how do you consider the interplay between physical and cognitive impairment for the walkability?
Thanks for that question, Ziying. One of the requirements when we recruited participants was that they should be able to independently move and navigate in their neighborhood. However, we did include participants who used mobility assistive devices. In fact, there were a number of participants who used walkers, and they were able to participate in the walk-along interview. Of course, the way that those interviews were paced compared to some other interviews where participants did not use devices was slightly different, taking more rest breaks, punctuating the walk-along interview with lots of pauses, and those interviews also tended to be quite short. In terms of the intersection between access needs and cognitive status, that's something that we're interested to focus on. Like I said, the stage in which we're at right now in the study is very nascent. We're still kind of in the initial stages of analysis, but that's something that we'll be on the lookout for as we progress further in data analysis. Thank you.
Kishore, you can stay up there. So I noticed in the Cancun Tri-City Senior Action Society and the BCCRN, I noticed during the presentation about the walkabout that you were describing that you didn't explain transit, washrooms, or overhead lighting, like at 3 o'clock in November, it's dark out. So, but I noticed that Emma did address those items. Was that something that you had difficulty with on your walkabouts with the washrooms, for instance?
Right, thank you for that question. So if you recall from the knowledge mobilization video, Esther Yun was one of the participants in the Demscape study. And one of the key issues that she encountered was the lack of a well-maintained public washroom that she can use when she's on walks in her community, and even if they're walks in the vicinity of her home. So those were sometimes mentioned issues of that nature, but like I said, the findings that I presented were from a small subset of participants because we're still in, the analysis is in progress. But once we make further headway, we will be focusing on the issue of washrooms needing to be more accessible and better maintained. We focused mainly on participants' walking experiences, so transit didn't come up as much, but we certainly did talk to a few participants who were experiencing driving cessation. And for them, given that their current extents of mobility are far greater spatially than some of the other participants, they touched on the eventuality of having to use transit in the future and how they would see embracing public transit as a part of their mobility plan going forward. So that was something that we briefly touched on.
Just to add to that, I mean, you talked about transit a lot outside the study, and it's such an important
Hi, my name is Minda, and I'm a kinesiologist and also a gerontologist, and I work hands-on with people, getting them walking in their community after a car accident often. So my question is, do you work with ICBC and look at intersections where the seniors have been hit or killed? Because it's quite a huge process to get them back to have confidence to cross the streets in the Lower Mainland. So they also might have money because they really do want to reduce the risk of injuries. Also, transit. I do work with Handy Dart and I do work with BC Transit. And they've got some innovative programs where they teach seniors how to use a bus again, teach people how to get back. So again, maybe an opportunity for money. They even would bring their bus, park it in front of our facility, and we would practice getting on a bus with people, help them get back to the way their life used to be. And there's an app in Coquitlam called, I think it's called Go Here, where you can go and look and see where the free public washrooms are in their community. So hopefully more communities will get that app going.
Great. I want to thank Habib and his team for an excellent set of presentations. Very interesting. Love the video. You really brought it to life. Thank you very much. Wonderful. And on that note, I see we're 20 seconds over time. So I'm going to really have to crack the whip. So it's 1 hour lunch. Note that you've got the coupons in your name tags for downstairs, 2 levels down. We're going to start on time. You have 1 hour. And also keep in mind that we're recording all of this, and the recordings will be after some editing, especially, probably this part. We're going to put that online a little later, and we'll let you know when that'll occur. So enjoy your lunch. We'll see you back right at 1 o'clock sharp, 20 seconds after the most. Thank you.